contrasts really with the actions of the government and the ministry, who now appear not to value the work of teachers and are undermining us by introducing charter schools and increasing class sizes. Now, when Avonside Girls High School returned to our community on the eastern side of town, it reinforced for me what an important part schools play in their communities, particularly now when there are so many, few community institutions left in Christchurch. A parent recently voiced these sentiments to me at a meeting held to discuss charter schools. He said that having the school back had given the community hope for the future, and with it a sense of beginning of renewal. Schools in Christchurch are central to their community. I cannot believe that politicians and the government are considering replacing existing true community successful schools with profit-driven charter schools which have no obligation to their communities. Now, Avonside's role has taken a real hit, with many families leaving the red zone properties, and this situation has been further exacerbated by the ministry refusing to confirm the occupation of our current site beyond the end of this year. We have to work even harder to promote our open evening. Many of the staff on the eastern side of town are so struggling with the stress of housing issues, as well as having to face looming job losses. This is the situation for a significant number of schools in Christchurch. The city has 5,000 fewer students now than it had before the quake, so inevitably a number of schools will be closed. I tell you this, not to get sympathy, though it's always nice, but to help you understand why we're so opposed to the establishment of charter schools. Christchurch doesn't need another school. We are already losing some of the ones we have, and we don't need a private takeover of our publicly owned community sites. How despicable is it for politicians and others to take advantage of our tragedy to push a privatisation agenda onto the kids, parents, teachers and principals of Christchurch? Now, this is exactly what happened in New Orleans. Commonly in USA, schools are funded by local property taxes. As a result, the wealthy, white, middle class have abandoned the inner city schools and taken up residence in leafy suburbs where their taxes fund beautiful schools for their children. The underfunded, run-down and dangerous city schools have been left to Afro-American children and their teachers. After Hurricane Katrina devastated New Orleans, the profiteers and the carpetbaggers had the excuse they wanted to justify closing all the public schools and substituting profit-making charter schools. None of the people now profiting from running charter schools had the least interest in paying their fair share of taxes so that the black children could get a fair deal before Hurricane Katrina. But once that terrible disaster occurred, they suddenly developed a social conscience and were given a free rein to set up their schools. Parents and students in New Orleans no longer have the choice to go to a public school because there aren't any. The state was totally abandoned its responsibility for education for those children. Their education has been left entirely to the whims of the market. Of course, the extensive marketing campaigns that go with charter schools would have you believe that there has been an educational improvement at near miracle levels in New Orleans. The reality is that the previous system was so impoverished, any expenditure would be likely to show some gains. And through the hype Consider this comment, which is summarised from interviews with students. Yes, real people, not just test marks. Other issues continue to hold students back, but no one looking at New Orleans schools seems to see what is actually happening on the ground. 60% of students surveyed don't use the restrooms at their schools. 70% of students say their classes do not have enough textbooks for every student, and half the students do not eat lunch every day. These are basic problems that still exist. 6 years after Hurricane Katrina, New Orleans public high schools are still plagued by severe inequities. Just talk to students. I don't think the pilot New Zealand charter schools will actually be as bad as that. They will certainly be doomed to succeed. One way or another, they will produce results to justify the establishment of a chain of schools, as John Banks called them in his instructions to the New Zealand Charter School Model Group. This is not about teaching and learning, it's about politics and profits. And the most cynical part of the politicking is that, as in South Auckland, the charter school apologists are manufacturing a simplistic tale of underachievement in order to justify this experiment. They are deliberately seeking to frighten parents and create unease about the local schools, because that will make fertile ground for the recruitment of charter school clients. What that amounts to is blaming schools and teachers for the very problems that we work to address every day of our lives. And without the funding and support that we would need to make a real difference. The Ministry of Education is now producing dubious data that is supposed to prove that education in East Christchurch is below par. This time last year, after researching the topic, they said that charter schools were not value for money, involved in too much bureaucracy, and have not consistently led to significant increases in achievement among lower performing student populations. Next minute, they're all for it. Maybe the Ministry of Education needs a name change. Ministry of flip-flops, or accurately capture what they do. The people of Christchurch never asked for a charter school. They didn't vote for one at the last election because it wasn't in the party manifestos. And they didn't vote for the ACT party. Wasn't even an ACT candidate in East Christchurch. Why do we have to have this unwelcome experiment inflicted on us? We don't want to be distracted from the ongoing struggles to rebuild our lives by this disruptive, politically driven stunt. I promise you, if there is any attempt to take over a public school site for a charter school, there will be community outrage and opposition. When the charter school announcement was made, we had concerned parents ringing the school, voicing their fears and anxieties. For the government to take advantage of a community in distress is blatant opportunism and shows a complete lack of care and concern for the families involved. Thank you for your invitation. I'm pleased to be here tonight to support you in your struggle against the charter school Trojan horse. And I know you will support our battle in Christchurch. Kia kaha, kia tau, kia mana nui, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.